Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I appreciate that. So we were in the middle of the hearing for SB 87 yesterday. We are going to pick right back up there and then resume the rest of our agenda. So Representative Hoskin, I believe you have another committee. And so I'm going to let you go first. I'm going to give everyone our customary reminders that impugning motives or engaging the committee in debate or the conferee in debate, which we got a little close to yesterday, is something that we don't do. We maintain a good decorum. I think we are a rock star example of that in our committee, but part of making good decorum is keeping the conversation down in the gallery, and also that we don't applaud or boo or anything like that. We spend all of our time, as much as time as possible, on discussion. I feel like, in fairness to everybody who testified yesterday, that it's appropriate to keep the same time limit. And again, if you find it uncomfortable to see the time when you testify, I will be happy to let you know. And please let me know also at the end of your testimony whether or not you would like to stand for questions. Representative Hoskins, you may begin.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and committee. We heard a lot yesterday about low-income students, and I'd like to remind the committee that Senate Bill 87 opens up 4 categories of eligibility for students of unlimited income, and I showed exactly how wealthy children can qualify for the scholarship, including children who first qualify under income limits and whose parents move up to unlimited incomes. I remember a discussion in K-12 budget in which many of you participated when it was said that the reduced lunch copay incentivized those becoming financially responsible for their children who they chose to have. So the committee voted no to $130 per child per year for those reduced lunch eligible families. Yet many of these members are considering this bill, which would continue an $8,000 low-income scholarship per child per year indefinitely, no matter the income level that the family achieves. Please help me make sense of that. We also heard that tax dollars aren't being used for the scholarship. So where did the $32 million for this tax credit come from? From the tax dollars that were slated for our state general fund, but were siphoned to private schools, which the state has no obligation to fund. I've passed out a chart yesterday, and I hope you still have it, showing all the things that SGF does. This credit allows taxpayers to sweep 75 cents of every dollar they owe in Kansas taxes, up to $500,000, that would otherwise support critical government functions like public schools, water, higher ed, KBI, and the Highway Patrol. I beg you to vote no on this bill and decrease state general funds when we're facing a deficit. And I will stand for, I love the timer, by the way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions for the conferee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Our next conferee is Leah Fleiter. And thank you for coming back today again. I appreciate all the frequent flyers who helped us to fit in our travelers and schedule conflicted folks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Good to be here again. As you know, KSB appears in opposition to this bill. We, and I believe no doubt everyone on this committee believes that Kansas public schools are the pride and the lifeblood of our state and are essential to our economic prosperity. And because of that, our legislative policy, which is cited on the first page of my testimony, includes that sentence that says, we oppose programs including but not limited to vouchers, education savings accounts, trust funds, scholarships, and tuition tax credits, because such programs divert public funds from public schools to schools which are not required to serve all students, okay? So, unfortunately, this bill does not help our Kansas communities improve their public schools, maintain their public schools, or increase outcomes for the 92% of the students in Kansas who attend public schools. We are concerned that this bill expands eligibility to non-low-income students. It doesn't require the student to have ever been enrolled in a public school, as was a requirement, I believe, when the statute was enacted. It opens the door for the state to simply start paying the private school tuition of well-to-do families, and it substantially increases the potential cost to taxpayers. So we would respectfully ask that you reject Senate Bill 87. Ooh, 14 minutes, 14 seconds to spare, 14 minutes. And I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you. Questions for the conferee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next opponent is Jim Carlskin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. I'm Jim Carlskin. I represent United School Administrators of Kansas. And we want you to know that United School Administrators of Kansas is not opposed to any parochial or private school. In fact, there are members from that group that are members of United School Administrators. And one thing that I think that having been a Catholic school principal for a number of years, as well as a public school principal and superintendent, I think I can talk to this pretty well in the sense that, you know, we talk about school choice. Frankly, this bill is school's choice. It's, having been a parochial school administrator, we didn't discriminate against kids, but we were selective. We selected kids not based on anything that is bad. If we couldn't serve them, or if we felt like they weren't a good fit, we didn't accept them or we didn't keep them. And that's one thing, as being a public school administrator, we didn't see that. We served all kids. And one of the things when we had special needs kids, we usually had them need to go, towards a public school. And one thing that I think that we need to keep in mind too is that schools are accredited in this program. There's a lot of talk about this black mass that's going to be held on March 28th here in the Capitol. What about if a school decided somebody wanted to start a satanic school? Okay, they could. So be careful what you wish for.
Thank you.
I'll stand for questions.
Questions for the conferee? Representative Pishney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim, in your testimony, one of your bullet points is tax credit and voucher programs in other states are ripe with waste, fraud, and abuse. And you highlight a couple of states. And then you go on to say what the funds might have been used for. But do those states that you're referencing in that bullet point, do they not have an audit procedure or an accountability procedure for the funds?
Some do and some don't, but some of them are very lax.
So the two states that you've referenced here, would they be ones that do not have accountability procedures?
They have accountability, but they are lax. It is documented that what I stated in my testimony, it's documented.
So if there was accountability or audits, would you have a different opinion about this program?
There's a lot of things it would need that I think before I would be in favor of this program. Even accountability with respect to students and how they're doing. It was said yesterday that Catholic schools do better than parochial schools. Parochial schools or Catholic schools do better than public schools. I'll give you an example. Wyandotte County does not have that record of showing that Catholic schools do better than their public counterparts.
That's fair. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Additional questions? Representative Hubert.
I think you'll agree with me, but I'll ask, does waste, abuse, and fraud happen in public schools? As a former school board member, I can tell you I saw it and witnessed it, and I know we try to deal with it, but from
To a degree, yes. I wouldn't say fraud. I'd say no, I won't say fraud. There's instances of fraud in all.
Additional questions? Representative Ruiz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Jim, bringing up Wyandotte County, what is the reason that the Catholic schools aren't doing so much better than the public schools? Can you?
Thank you for that question. I think it's appropriate. We in education, you being that committee, so much of student achievement has to do with poverty. It is tough. You know, and I've worked in Kansas City, Kansas public schools, and I know a lot of the parochial school teachers and administrators in KCK. They work their tails off, but it is more difficult to teach kids in poverty. That's a given.
Any other questions? Jim, thank you for being with us again today. We will move online to Mary Sinclair. Welcome back, Mary.
Thank you. All right. Can you hear me?
We hear you. You may begin.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Kansas PTA. We are opposed to the use of public funds to subsidize private school systems with restricted student access and no oversight. In brief, private schools can dismiss students with academic or behavioral challenges at will. We heard about such practices in K-12 Budget Committee, failing students intentionally being transitioned out. Research has demonstrated this practice leads to artificially inflated private school graduation rates and outcomes and is incredibly harmful to at-risk youth, as evidenced by voucher programs in other states where students transitioned back to the public schools, returned from collapsed micro schools with an average learning loss of 2 years compared to their peers who remained in public schools. Private non-public schools are allowed to operate with no oversight requirements, as evidenced by the absence of impact data on this 10-year program to date that's being debated. Private school choice is not parent choice, and eligibility does not equal access, particularly here in Kansas. If this tax credit program is intended to be a low-income scholarship program, then there is no need for continued expansion. Over the past 10 years, this tax credit program has left millions in funds unallocated without scholarship vouchers offered to over 230,000 eligible students, which equates to over 600 unfilled student slots on average annually. Note when eligibility was expanded again last year beyond students participating in the lunch program, primarily youth at less than 130% of poverty, to those living at 250%, program participation doubled. And with the additional eligibility criteria completely untethered from family wealth, this will allow private schools to skip right over those struggling youth for whom this program has been justified year after year. If the goal is to improve outcomes for struggling students, we urge this committee to use those dollars to reimburse your local school districts for their special education service expenditures mandated by the state and the federal government. Our public schools are the heart of Kansas communities, serving 90% of school-age youth. We urge this committee to vote no on Senate Bill 87 and to stay focused on meeting our statutory obligations for all our youth first. Thank you.
Mary, thank you very much. Do we have questions for the conferee? Seeing none, Mary, thank you for being with us again today. And again, thank you for helping us manage our time yesterday.
Thank you,
Okay,
Madam Chair.
You're welcome. That concludes our testimony for today on this hearing. So unless there is anybody that I have missed, Dan, is there anyone online who is saying that they are here to testify on this bill? I think Kirsten is for the other bill, but let's confirm before we close our hearing. Okay, thank you very much. All righty. So to manage the time that we have for the rest of the day, we have a couple of carryover items from yesterday, discussion and action on Senate Bills 44 and 78. And so I'm going to enter into that and then reserve the balance of that time for our other bill hearing. So I am going to open discussion and action on SB 44. Is there anybody who has any discussion or amendments they would like to offer on 44? And Jason, would you like to review that bill for us very quickly?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill 44, this bill came over from the Senate amending two statutes under the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program. The first amendment is to expand the definition of eligible post-secondary educational institution to pick up certain institutions, as appear on page 1 of the bill, that have a main campus or principal place of operation in Kansas and is recognized by State Board of Regents. They offer a promise-eligible program recognized by the State Board of Regents and is accredited by a nationally recognized accrediting agency for higher education. And then there is a further amendment on page 3 to increase the annual appropriation limit from 10 million up to 15 million.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions for Jason? Representative Stogsdill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Refresh me, Jason, does this include now for-profit schools?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, yes, the new definition does not specify whether the institution has to be for-profit or not for-profit. So it would include, I believe, for-profit institutions.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jason? Dawn? Representative Wolf, I apologize.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On page 2, line 2, high wage, high demand, critical need, what is the definition of those jobs? Which jobs is this applying to? Do we know?
Jason?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, those are jobs that are identified. I believe it's a different section of the Promise program that doesn't appear in the bill, but there is a determination of what those jobs are. It's the State Board of Regents in consultation or coordination, I believe, with the Department of Labor that determines those jobs, but I can verify.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Representative, do you have a follow-up?
I do. So if we go to page 2, line 34 through line 39, I'm going to read that real quick. And I know this is already there.
Excuse me, Representative Wolf, I'm sorry, Mr. Neal, I think you mean well, but you are not to breach the border. You may proceed.
So I'm sure this is already in statute, it's not changed, but I wonder where these numbers come from. Kansas Promise Scholarship shall only be awarded to an eligible student whose family household income equals $100,000 or less for a family of 1 or 2, $150,000 or less for a family of 3, and for household sizes above 3, a household income that is equal to or less than the family of 3 amount plus $4,800 for each additional family member. When I look this up, that's, if you go to 250% of poverty level, this is double that. So this would be like 500% above poverty level. Where did these numbers come from is my question. Please, Jason.
You may answer.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, those are current law under the bill, and I would have to double check. They may be the numbers that were part of the original enactment of the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program, but we can certainly track down when those numbers became law.
Thank you. They just seem rather high to me. Appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions for the reviser? Okay. Any discussion that we'd like to have? Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Disclaimer, I do have community college in my district that has Promise Scholars in it, but I think this is a good bill. I think it does expand the number of institutions that can receive these students, which may cause some heartburn, but I did check in with my not-for-profit community college, and they were fine with it. And I'm looking back at the testimony and thinking back to when we passed this, and this was really a workforce development program. It's not specifically targeted at the extremely poor or anything like that. It was all about workforce development and trying to fill our empty Kansas positions with Kansas kids and really adults changing careers to kind of keep us moving forward and solidify the Kansas economy. So I will be supporting for that reason.
Thank you, Representative Wolf.
So she has just helped me with something possibly. Can I ask if she has knowledge of, so if you already have a degree in something, you can still go for this one or not?
I'm not sure I'm the one to ask that. In my estimation, I'm not a lawyer.
Do you know,
like if you
Jason?
lost your job and were changing careers.
I kind of feel comfortable asking the reviser and research, because I think Representative Featherston and I might have been freshmen when this came about, and we have both always supported the program, and it has always been pitched as essential to workforce shortages in key industries that we have here in Kansas, but I don't remember the details well enough. So if research or the reviser knows the answer to Representative Wolf's question, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. I realize that my ignorance is showing, but I just need answers to this.
Say it's not
Thank you.
ignorance, it's just not here.
It's I think it's institutional knowledge that comes over time. So by no stretch of the imagination does anyone in this room consider you ignorant. You are highly respected. Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You pretty well said what I was going to, but the Promise Scholarship is about supplying critical labor needs. And the promise part of it is that you need to fulfill an obligation in the workforce. Otherwise, you have to repay this scholarship. And we talked about, I think we had a bill here a while back that talked about the interest rates that you'd have to repay that at. And this is really, like you said, it's really a workforce development, and particularly in those critical areas.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Hubert.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this is probably for Jason. I saw that there was an amendment, I think, by Senator Petty on the House, or on the Senate floor. Could you clarify which amendment was added on the Senate side that we have before us now?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the Senate Committee of the Whole amendment was to increase the annual appropriation limit from 10 million to 15 million.
Thank you.
And Jason, do you happen to know where that is in the Senate appropriation process? And if not, we understand you don't. Okay, thank you. I don't know either. Any further discussion? Any amendments? Jason, are we close to finding out the answer to Representative Wolf's question? We will allow time. I'd like for everybody to, I think getting answers is important, although sometimes challenging.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, there is not an explicit prohibition on having already obtained a degree, a post-secondary degree, in order to be eligible for a Promise Scholarship. The criteria for student eligibility is listed in 74-32, COM 275, with various criteria that a student must meet. It is possible for a student to meet the eligibility criteria and have already obtained a post-secondary degree. I will just point out that the Promise eligible programs are primarily directed at two-year associate degree programs and career and technical education certificates and programs at the eligible institutions.
Representative Wolf, did that answer your question adequately? And I won't say what I remember happening in the past, because the past has been time, but I will say that sometimes people do become displaced from their jobs, and helping people to get retrained when they're filling a critical need and agreeing to serve, to me, makes me comfortable with that. Any other discussion, or anybody have any amendments? Seeing none, Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to report favorably for passage. A motion to report favorably for passage. Geez.
Thank you. And there's a second from Representative Hill. Final call for discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. Thank you all very much. Excellent discussion. We are going to move through to Senate Bill 78, which is requiring post-secondary educational institutions to regularly review and update accreditation policies. And I will let Jason finish the second half, all the rest of that explanation.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill 78 would create new law requiring post-secondary educational institutions to regularly review and update their accreditation policies. They would have to do so initially by the end of 2025 and would be required to identify any accrediting agencies or associations that are recognized by the U.S. Department of Education that are eligible to accredit the institution or any of its programs, and would update the policies and practices on accreditation of the institution to ensure that they can pursue accreditation by any of those identified accrediting agencies or associations. It would also prohibit any accrediting agency or association from compelling an institution to violate any state law, and provides a cause of action to the institution for any violation of that prohibition. And then I would just point out that the Act has a definition of post-secondary educational institution, includes the Regents institutions, the municipal universities, private post-secondary educational institutions, and not-for-profit institutions that are located in Kansas, operated independently of any state agency or subdivision, and are accredited by a nationally recognized accrediting agency for higher education. Also included are community colleges.
Thank you. Questions for the reviser? Representative Hubert?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm just looking at the bill history. It said that the Senate passed it out as amended, but it doesn't have record. And I know sometimes with committee that doesn't get put in the bill history, but I was just curious what was amended in committee on this bill.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the Senate committee amendments were on page 2 to add 2 additional types of post-secondary institutions to the definition: the not-for-profit institutions and then the community colleges.
And Jason, do you remember what this passed the Senate by?
On final action, it was a vote of 38-2.
Thank you. Any other questions for the reviser? Seeing none, do we have discussion or amendments? Seeing none, the chair recognizes Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I make the motion to report favorably the passage of Senate Bill number 78.
And I see a second from Representative Chauncey. In last call for discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Does anybody wish to be recorded? Representative Featherston wishes to be recorded as a no. And the motion carries.
You did. Sorry. I was informed that there was an amendment coming, and I should have said something.
Okay, you're not at your microphone, and we need to use microphones to maintain an open meeting laws.
My apologies if I'm recognized, but
Thank you. Representative McNorton, would you like to share something with us?
Yes, I would. So my apologies to the committee. It's been brought to my attention that there's a technical amendment we wanted to have on this bill, and I just didn't bring it up. I had it sitting here, but if we could, if with the will of the body, reopen the bill and present my amendment.
I'm going to take what you just said as a motion to reconsider, which is what would be in order, and it passes on a simple majority. Is there a second, Representative Hubert, to reconsider SB 78? Is there discussion on the motion to reconsider? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. Representative McNorton, we will open discussion with you.
I'll let Revisor Jason explain this real quick. It looks like a really long amendment, but it's just all the different statutes and the different stuff it touches within the amendment that makes it look really long, but it's a simple technical amendment here, and I'll let Jason explain that.
Jason, go ahead.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the amendment being passed out would add 5 statutes to the bill to make reference changes in those statutes. And the example I will point out is on page 1 of the attachment in KSA 8-1, COM 142. You can see there are specific references to specific accrediting associations and agencies and statutes. This one in particular is to the North Central Association of Colleges and Secondary Schools. Those specific references are being stricken and replaced with the broader descriptive language that you see there on page 1 of an accrediting agency or association recognized by the United States Department of Education in the database maintained by such department. And so instead of the specifically named accrediting agency, it would be replaced with that descriptive language. And again, these are the 5 statutes where those specific references are in existence under current law and being replaced with the broader descriptive language in the new blue text.
Thank you, Jason. Are there questions for the revisor? And take your time. I always like to give you lots of time to look at things so I'll give you a couple minutes over until I see people not looking. Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just clarify, does this request come from the revisor to clean up?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, no, this is not considered a technical amendment by the revisor's protocol.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jason? Representative Ruiz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Jason, what does this do to the base bill?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, for Senate Bill 78, it would add these 5 statutes to the base bill to make these amendments regarding accrediting agencies and associations for post-secondary schools. It doesn't change the substance of the underlying bill of new section 1 at all. These are, I guess, in one sense, a conforming amendment in that it is bringing the description of an accrediting agency recognized by the U.S. Department of Education into these 5 statutes as opposed to the specific naming of a specific accrediting agency.
One more, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So what happens if the Department of Education is done away with? What do we do then?
As an excellent hypothetical, Representative.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This might be for Jason, or maybe research is, does the Department of U.S. Department of Education have several different accrediting agencies, or is it just the North Central Association?
Madam Chair, we would have to look up to see what accredited agencies are currently recognized by the U.S. Department of Education.
And I believe Elena and Nicole are taking a look right now. We'll deal with other questions while they search for an answer. Representative Brantley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I kind of had the same question earlier, and I went on to the U.S. Department of Ed and looked up their accrediting agencies. From what I can tell, and Jason, please clarify if this is not correct, it looks like they provide the list of those agencies. Should the U.S. Department of Ed not be dissolved, should it be dissolved, Jason, can you clarify whether those agencies are outside agencies that really would not affect other than just the list being provided?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the accrediting agencies or associations are private organizations outside the U.S. Department of Education. The new language being proposed would require that these post-secondary institutions be accredited by an agency or association that is recognized by the U.S. Department of Education and a database that is maintained by the Department of Education. And so if the United States Department of Education is dissolved and is no longer in existence, it would not be able to recognize or maintain a database of accrediting agencies or associations.
Did that answer your question? Okay. Any other, Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I did not use the right term earlier. It should have been a clarification is what I think this is. Instead of naming a certain agency, we gave the option back to the schools. So what's the whole intent of this is to let all the schools have the right to go out and choose the accreditation agency they want instead of naming a certain agency in the bill or in the statute that we're referencing.
Thank you. Representative Reese, did you have any follow-up question on that? Okay. Any other questions? Representative Hubert.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I wanted to apologize to you also. I had talked to somebody about this bill, and they were encouraging me to support it, but they also mentioned an amendment that they said they were good with, and so that's why I interrupted the proceeding, because I thought maybe I had gotten confused and was double checking, and so my apologies, though, for...
Thank you, and I just like us to stay on microphone so that we don't get in coma trouble. I kind of get in enough trouble. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was hoping Jason could, sorry, brain fart. I was hoping Jason could clarify on page 26, why are we referencing cereal malt beverage in this education bill?
While he looks, I will share with you that one time I had a bill about adoption tax credits, and for some reason, that was in the statute with pig farms, and that bill looked like it was adoption and pig farms, and I'll let Jason answer that question.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Section 5 being added is a statute that provides definitions for the Kansas Comprehensive Grant Program. Part of those definitions are, let me see here. No, I'm sorry, it's under 79-3602, which is the Kansas Retailer Sales Tax Act. And so it's relevant definitions for the Retailer Sales Tax Act. And part of those definitions involve educational institution, which is where you see the substantive amendment on page 12 of the attachment. But then, as is reviser protocol, is to clean up statutes that are being amended with any other technical cleanups. And so you will see some adjustments throughout the statute, including on page 26 regarding cereal malt beverage. Those amendments are simply our technical cleanups by the revisor's office.
Thank you. Very, very good question. Any other questions about this amendment or discussion? Representative Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, hypothetical for Jason. Not knowing the origin of this, I may have been absent this day, but I think the North Central Association at this point is called the Higher Learning Commission. But the real question is, did you say that this would then, let's say, make available a list of accrediting agencies and a post-secondary institution can choose which it chooses?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, yes, the institutions in these statutes could be accredited by any accrediting agency that's recognized by the U.S. Department of Education, as opposed to being required to be accredited by the Higher Learning Commission.
Madam Chair, can I follow up?
Yes, you may.
So hypothetical then, what does that do for transferability of college credits? What does that do to, if there's different graduation requirements? Is there any language in here or assurance that, for lack of a better word, they have articulation agreements with each other, but it's not articulation, it's accrediting?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, as I was reviewing these statutes, none of them discussed transferability or articulation agreements among various post-secondary institutions. That would be up to the individual institutions and their individual accrediting agencies.
You're very welcome. Other questions or discussion? Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hadn't really planned to speak on this bill. I think it's bad from the start. I think this is making it worse. We're making a slippery slope for our colleges and other higher ed institutions. I feel like they could be pressured to choose certain accreditors, and funding could be threatened with withholding, which we've certainly already seen in the budget process this year from other groups. Also, the uncertainty at the federal level. I'm not interested in throwing our higher ed institutions into that level of chaos. And again, like I said when this bill was heard, we have programs like mental health programs, which we all agree are incredibly important for children and really the whole community today, that could be jeopardized by their codes of ethics being followed by the schools within a college. And I would really caution people to think about if they want to risk mental health training in Kansas.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, the chair calls the question. Those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. No. Anybody who would like to be recorded? Representative Featherston, Miller, Ruiz, Nguyen, and Stogsdill. And I assume those are all a no, correct? All right. So we are back on the bill. Is there any discussion or questions about the bill? Yes, ma'am. Representative Nguyen.
I will repeat what I just said. If there is no language, absence of language about accreditation, and there is a risk of we'll have to time him out. Okay, sorry. I digress. But nevertheless, there's if you're knowledgeable higher education, you know that the accreditation by Higher Learning Commission and other schools is a very intense and complete, comprehensive process, and that it, for an institution to get a provisional accreditation or a 5-year or 10-year, it is important for the students who are attending, for funding, for just the assurance to the students that what they're spending their money is a reliable institution, and for the possibility, because there is no certainty. I think the part where it says requiring to regularly review, update policies makes sense, but the manner in which this bill explains that is questionable. So I can't support it. I'm in higher education, and you know the importance of accreditation. So I think we're jeopardizing our students' futures. Thank you.
You're welcome, Representative Brantley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also, the only experience I have is with like a teacher ed department, but when we worked with our in-K accreditation, they give you the guidelines up front, and you kind of know here is your base, and this is what the accreditation will do for you. So if it doesn't align with your intentions and your goals for your area, then that would be something you'd have to look into when you get that accreditation.
I did visit with Elena, and there is a big, huge list, so big as to not sit here and read all of it, but she is emailing you all a link to the list. Is there any further discussion? Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, something I think is important to realize on this is that we are not taking away reference to accreditation in this bill. What we are saying is that the institution has the choice of any accrediting agency that is approved by the U.S. Department of Education.
Thank you. And Jason, can you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the U.S. Department of Education was established by law, and for it to no longer exist would take an act of Congress and the Senate?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, it is my understanding that the U.S. Department of Education was established by statute, and its complete dissolution and abolishment would require a subsequent act of Congress.
Thank you. And I think, and I asked that question not to debate, but to just bring peace, because I have a lot of people asking me what would happen if that happened. So the first question in my mind is, what is the likelihood? And I think getting Congress to do much is hard. But you are welcome to respond.
I'm not going to debate you, but all we have to do is be aware of what is happening, and that is not happening. So, not debating.
No, I
wait
don't,
and see.
I don't consider your words or my words debate. I just wanted to kind of put out there what would it take, because I think it is causing people anxiety. So, okay. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, the chair recognizes Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I apologize for my absent-mindedness on my amendment. But I moved motion to report favorably for passage Senate Bill number 78 as amended.
And Representative Chauncey seconds that again. Last chance for discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. No. And is anybody like to be recorded? Representative Miller, Featherston, Ruiz, Wynn, and Stogsdill. Okay, so we have, for the second time today, passed that bill. And we now move on to our hearing on Senate Bill 47. And I am going to begin by calling on the reviser to explain the bill to us.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 47 is a statute, is a bill amending some statutes regarding the operations of local boards of education of school districts. I'll start off. The bill amends KSA 72-1138, which is a statute granting general powers and duties of local boards of education. I'll direct your attention to page 2 of the bill. New paragraph 4 would require that each Board of Education publish the name and email address of each member of the board on the school district website. These names and addresses are also to be sent to the Department of Education, which will maintain a public database of such information. New paragraph 5, starting in line 21, directs board members that they may add one discussion item to the agenda of a board meeting, and then they can also ask questions and otherwise engage in discussion with members of the public at board meetings. There's also to be a public comment period provided at each regularly scheduled Board of Education's meeting. The bill then amends KSA 72-1145. This authorizes payment of dues for membership in the Kansas Association of School Boards. The amendment would strike the specific reference to that organization and allow for payment of dues for membership in a not-for-profit organization that provides guidance, resources, and other services to member school districts. And then finally, 72-1416, which governs control of school district property, is amended with a new subsection that provides that members of the local school board have access to school district property during school hours or when the property is open to events. The bill passed on final action in the Senate on a vote of 21-19, and these changes would go into effect on July 1st if enacted. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions for Jason? Representative Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With access to property, does it prohibit requiring a background check?
There is no specificity as to any other protocols or procedures with respect to access to the school district property.
That's for board members?
That for the board members, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions for Jason? Representative Stogsdill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are any of these provisions, are they, couldn't local school boards of the State Board of Education already impose these?
I believe it is within the discretion of the local boards of education to allow for agenda items to be added to meetings, public comment periods, access to school property by board members. Yes, I believe these are requirements that would be added into the statute as opposed to discretionary policies.
Thank you.
Representative Hubert. I tend to prefer to do those things during discussion unless you submitted testimony. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else with questions for Jason? Okay, seeing none. I have an interesting situation because Michelle needed to leave unexpectedly today. I don't have access to the testimony, and I have 9 names, and I'm not sure. Some names I know because you are all frequently here, or you have told me privately who all are opponents and proponents. So I'm going to start with 2 that I recognize as 2 proponents, and then I will ask if there are other proponents. I am, in the interest of time, going to stick with the 1 minute 45 seconds that we had going earlier, and I am going to begin with Dave Trabert. Is he here? Dave, I didn't see you. Welcome to back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dave Trabert, CEO of Kansas Policy Institute and our Kansas School Board Resource Center. A.J. Crable is a nationally recognized school board trainer, and he says that student outcomes won't change until adult behaviors change. And that really is the issue before you today. The sad truth is that many school districts have policies that prevent these actions. And so this is about whether school board members are going to have the freedom to be able to do what they think is necessary on an individual basis to improve outcomes. And they're not good. I mean, we've seen college readiness drop from 32% to 18% since 2015 on the ACT test. We have 332,000 students in Kansas on the state assessment cannot read proficiently. We have a serious problem. And if these outcomes are not acceptable, the question becomes, are we as adults willing to change in order to try to improve those outcomes? I know from the testimony in the Senate that what the objections are. I'd note that there's no evidence. Many board members' email addresses are published. Some school districts allow board members to visit schools. If there were security issues, you'd be hearing this is what happened, not what might happen. On the agenda item, there was a situation, and I see I have 5 seconds left. The agenda item can be extremely critical. Hayes High School.
Thank you. That's our practice. When the bell goes off, we stop.
Okay.
Did you want to stand for questions?
Sure.
Are there questions for the conferee? Representative Hubert.
You intrigued me with what you started to say, and I would like to ask the question just to allow you to finish that thought, because
Sure. So thank you for the question, Representative. Hayes is building a new high school. The public learned that there are no boys and girls restrooms in this high school. There is a common wash area, and then inside that, there are stalls with walls to the ceiling. And a lot of parents were disturbed by that, and they wanted to have a board discussion to see if that's really what the community wanted. The board member who wanted to get this on the agenda could not get the majority to say, yes, let's ask our community. I mean, board members are not elected to represent the district or their own views. They're elected to represent the community, the voters. And so that's why this is really important.
Other questions for the conferee? Thank you for being with us. I'm sorry, Representative Featherston.
To follow up on the representative from Wyandotte County's question, are you saying that childhood sexual abusers should be allowed on property and board members that have proven themselves to be mentally unstable should be allowed on property with unlimited access?
Well, Representative, I'm sure you know that's not what I'm saying. I am saying that an elected board member who probably has gone through a fair amount of community vetting, and if that were the case, the community would know and probably not elect that person. These are people who were elected by the community. And I would say if there's any benefit of the doubt, it should go to what's in students' best interest, not the adults' best interest. And a board member wanting to go in and just observe, not tell people what to do, just go in and see what's going on. What can we do differently as a board to try to remove barriers to kids being proficient?
Thank you. Representative Steele.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for being here and testifying. I enjoy the work that you do. On page 2 of the bill, it talks about, hold on, I might be in the wrong place. I apologize. It's the part of the bill about allowing the discussion topics where they may only add one topic to the meeting. Can you explain some of that?
So a lot of school districts have adopted policies recommended by the State School Board Association that cede control of the agenda to the board president or sometimes the board president and the superintendent. It varies by district. And the only way that an individual board member can get something put on the agenda, like Mr. Park wanted to do in Hayes, is to ask the president to do it. And if the president doesn't want to do it, the only other option is to try to get the majority of the board to agree to add it at the meeting. We're just trying to say, let a board member add one discussion item to an agenda.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions for the conferee? All right, seeing none. The chair recognizes Tracy Frederick. I believe you are a proponent. Do we have a Tracy Frederick online, Nat? Nope. Okay, maybe perhaps that is written only. State Senator Doug Shane was here. He wanted to testify as a proponent. He said if he needed to leave, to please then regard his testimony as written. And if he comes back, I will go ahead and call on him. Is there anybody else who is a proponent? Please come forward and identify yourself. And you did submit written testimony. Okay. And your name, please?
Madam Chair, my name is Amy Covey. I saw most of you last week, I believe, on another bill. I'm a school board member in Lansing, Kansas, and you have my written testimony, but I wanted to give you some more, my personal experience with this. And as far as the emails being published, our district does publish those. I know before I've heard that there could be a security risk, cyber risk to that. My email's been published on there for 3.5 years now, no issues with that. my phone number. I freely share that on social media. I believe that's part of my duty, is how I serve as a member. The agenda item is extremely important. I have worked both where I was in a leadership role on the board and where I was not. And over the past year, we have experienced that where the current board president was holding that agenda, where he would not allow 3 members of the board to add their items to the agenda. We would try to amend the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. That would waste several minutes of time during our meeting, going back and forth, getting voted down. We ended up using state statute where any 3 members can call a special meeting. That didn't go over too well because they got sick of coming in on a different day, but all of that was pointless. All we wanted to do was to be able to represent our constituents. We may not be in the majority, we may not be the president of the board, but we still need to represent those. The president of the board is supposed to be a parliamentary position. It should not hold more power than the rest of the board. And that's what was being done at our district. So finally, after about 6 months of going back and forth, we were able to amend our board policy where each member could add 1 item to the agenda. And I can tell you, since then, it has went much more smoothly. I can see where it shouldn't be unlimited items, but it's worked really well, and I'm probably going over since there wasn't a timer.
I apologize to everybody.
okay.
I did forget to push the button,
Yeah.
but I think it's easily been more than.
Yes, it has, sorry, I could probably do it
I was looking around because I had printed, and I apologize to the committee, I had printed out the statute that it deals with agenda items being added because there is an existing statute. And I thought that I would add clarity by sharing that, and maybe Jason can look for it. I know I printed it out in advance of the meeting. So that's why I was distracted, and I apologize again.
Okay, but I'll stand for questions.
Do we have questions for the conferee? Representative Pishney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think you just made one of the points that I wanted to ask about, and that is, if I I'm just trying to get clarification to make sure I haven't misunderstood.
Yes, sir.
But if I understood your last comment, the Lansing School Board revised its own policies to include the agenda item addition.
Yes, sir.
That's how I believe school boards should work. And I appreciate that school board doing so, because school boards should be the ones that sets policy within the district. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand. I agree with you somewhat. We were able, since we had 3 members, to do so, but unfortunately, members across the state, often they're 1 or 2 members and they're not able to get that accomplished. I've attended training with members from various districts that they have not had the luck that we have. I'm a pretty persistent person, and I kept at it and was able to accomplish that, but it's not the norm. So unfortunately, I wish it was. I do appreciate local control, but I have seen where most of the time that does not happen.
And Madam Chair, some of my other comments toward that will be in our discussion on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Hubert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a former school board member who was in the minority, I think from what you're telling me that this, if you are in the minority on a school board and trying to represent your district, this bill would provide you opportunities that you might not have unless a bill like this would be passed.
Yes, sir. And you still would need the board majority, obviously, for any action, but at least you can be publicly heard, you can represent your constituents, and with the COMA laws, it's almost impossible, what is impossible, to discuss things other in open session. So that's why I think it's vitally important.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the conferee? Thank you, Amy. You may have a seat.
Thank you.
According to my list, I don't think I have other proponent testimony. If there's anybody else who would like to identify themselves as a proponent, please do so.
I'd like
to. Thank you. Please say your name.
Hi, my name's Kirsten Workman. I'm also from Lansing.
Thank you, Kirsten. You may proceed, and I will hit the timer button this time.
Okay, thank you. You have my written testimony already, I assume, so I'm just going to try and hit the highlights and really focus in on what I think is the most important part of this bill, which is that agenda item. Yes, our board does each member to submit one agenda item, but it doesn't always work out the way you would think. So I never imagined as a school board member, and everything I say as a school board member here today is my own opinion, not representative of the board as a whole, of course, but I never imagined the uphill battle in store for those seeking to bring transparency and accountability to public education and in turn better outcomes for our students. While we might disagree on the causes of the education crisis we're experiencing or what the solution should be, I think we can all agree that the free exchange of ideas and information, as well as the public's access to their elected representatives, are basic requirements for a free society, let alone a successful school district. So access to their representatives is where we must begin. To be honest, engaging with parents, teachers, and other members of the community has been actively and strongly discouraged. As you know, local school boards meet once a month in open session. Current law requires the superintendent and the board president set the agenda for the meeting. Two people, only one of whom is elected, decide what the board will address each month. The keeper of the agenda holds most of the power. Good leaders exercise restraint. Poor leaders rely on that parliamentary power to control the outcomes. Control the content of speech in an open meeting, and you control not only everything the organization does and acts upon, but how its actions are perceived by the public. You may imagine that I have not been actively prevented from discussing things in open session, but I assure you I most certainly have. Not only have agenda items been refused, executive session has been refused.
You
Our
are
board,
out of time. Thank you very much. Would you like to stand for questions?
yes.
Questions for the conferee? Seeing none, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We do appreciate that. Of the names that I have left, there's only one other name that I'm not certain about, and that is Dr. Tanya Merrigan. Thank you. Since that was not in a microphone, we were being informed that that was really intended to be written only. Thank you. Then I assume that the rest are opponent testimony, and I could begin with Shannon Kimball.
Timer?
Yeah, I've got it ready.
Great. All right. Thank you, Chair Estes and members of the committee, Shannon Kimball, Kansas Association of School Boards. I'll begin by saying I have served on my local Board of Education for 14 years, so I have extensive experience in both chairing meetings and all of the processes that this bill touches. KASB has a specific policy on this issue. We ask that you not subject boards of education to different open meetings requirements than are applied to every other governing body in the state, including yourselves. Sadly, Senate Bill 47 is a stealth attempt to make changes to our open meetings requirements by placing them into the part of the statute that has to do with board powers and duties. So it really targets just school board members for a change to what amounts to over 50 years of established law, court precedent, and board policy on open meetings procedures. I know my time is limited. I'll give you an example of why this is so important. My board has been dealing with substantial disruptions from people who come from outside of our community specifically to challenge our decorum rules. The flexibility that our board president has to make changes to public comment and to decide whether or not to have it has been essential to us being able to proceed with the with the business of our district in support of our students and staff. Without that flexibility, our hands would be tied. I can tell you that myself and other members of my board have been receiving safety threats as a result of these disruptions. This is a very serious matter, and it goes far beyond, the bill goes far beyond what has been discussed so far in terms of its impact and the potential negative outcomes. I am happy to stand for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions for the conferee? Representative Pishney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm somewhat confused, and I haven't had an opportunity to look through all the statutes, but previous conferees said that it's in statute that the superintendent or administrator set the agenda for the board meeting, maybe in consultation with the board chair. Is that true? Is that your understanding? Because my understanding was the board members, through its chair, would set the agenda.
Thank you for that question, Representative Pishney. I believe that your understanding of how it works in practice is correct. The superintendent will provide input based on the business of the district that they understand needs to be done. The board chair will participate in creating that agenda, but ultimately, it is the board's agenda because it has to be approved and voted on by 4 members of the board before you begin your board meeting.
And Madam Chair, I don't know if this was to the reviser or the conferee, but the reference saying it was in statute is troublesome to me. I don't believe it is, but I'm not the authority on statute.
I will happily have Jason, I think he's been looking for the answer to that question because it's my recollection that it is. And I think you might have it in front of you based on you looking.
I do have the piece about approval. It is in statute. A majority of the full membership of the board shall constitute a quorum for the purpose of conducting any business of the school district, and the vote of a majority of the full membership of the board shall be required for the passage of any motion or resolution. That includes approving an agenda. And it also includes amending an agenda to add anything. So while I recognize that at times board members have issues they would like to discuss, I think that it is important as a board member that you work through your relationships with your fellow board members and your superintendents to get support from your board to bring that item to the table. And really this bill short circuits that. It kind of is a shortcut to not have to do that hard work of working as a group and cooperating to do the business of the district.
Thank you. Representative Pishny, did that answer your question? You're welcome. Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know when I first ran for office, my husband and family had some concerns about my personal safety and our address. Do you feel like your safety could be compromised if your personal address was, say, on the school district website?
I would not want my home address to be published on the school district website for personal safety reasons. That is information that you have to provide when you file, and it is publicly available. The concern about email addresses maybe is slightly different than that. Some districts, and we have districts ranging from size of Wichita to size of, our smallest district, Healy. They have very different IT capacities. And so the local decisions about how they choose to provide IT resources to their board members and how they manage those email systems and maintain the security of their IT systems, those have to be local policy decisions because we cannot possibly account for every difference in resources and capacity at every school district across the state in this particular area, I believe.
Thank you. Any other questions for the conferee? Representative Hill. I'm sorry, did I pass over you? I apologize.
That's okay.
That was me, not you.
I'm not worried. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for coming and testifying, Shannon. And I think you alluded to the fact that your organization has guidelines for public comment at your members' board meeting. Is that correct?
Our association provides to our members model policies in that area that comply with the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. And then once a district chooses to adopt policy, which it would be my belief that every or nearly every school district in the state has a set of policies about board operations that includes agendas, rules of orders, meeting procedures, voting methods, and public participation. And so they can amend those model policies in any way that they see fit locally to meet their needs. And that decision about local policy is really important. In fact, that is part of how we are allowed to maintain decorum in our public participation in our local meetings. And I'm very concerned with this bill that the statutory requirement that's in it would inadvertently remove some of those protections from local boards of education.
Thank you. Could you share with me what your model policy says about open meetings?
What it says about the public participation piece?
Or not open meetings, yeah, the public participation.
I don't have the language in front of me, but essentially it says that the board may include public participation on an agenda, and you may dedicate an amount of time to that. You may ask if there are multiple people coming to speak on the same subject. The board chair may, depending on the agenda, ask them to appoint a spokesperson if they all have the same comment to make. And it's designed to ensure that the public comment that is made is, can be part of the overall agenda of the meeting, and that the board chair has the ability to account for, say you have a really long and complicated agenda, and maybe you only have, 30 minutes of time to set aside for public comment, and you can put some time, place, and manner parameters around that, and that's permitted by the Open Meetings Act for every governing body in the state of Kansas. So the legislature itself, the State Board of Education, community college boards of trustees, city commissions, county commissions, water board, library board, hospital board, all of those governing bodies and public agency public meetings are subject to those same rules.
So I'm sure it could be possible that legislative committees have the option to not have public comment, but I think you all benefit from the fact that we do allow public comment.
Yes, and I believe that that is the same, if I may, Representative, I believe that that is the same for school boards. In my written testimony, which I encourage you to read, it's lengthier than usual, and I apologize, but this is a really important topic. School districts have a number of ways that they seek input from stakeholders. Public comment at the meetings is one of them, but it's not the only one, and it might not even be the most important or effective one, right? Those opportunities to individually interact with constituents throughout the community through other kinds of interactions, stakeholder feedback gathering tools, surveys, visits to schools, visit to community groups. Sometimes school districts hold public forums that are more like a public hearing than public comment at the business meeting of the board. And that's a really important distinction. We're talking about regular board meetings. Those are business meetings of the board. So it's even a little more like the work that you do on the floor versus what happens in this committee room in terms of it's the business of the body being conducted in the public view.
In the interest of time, I'm going to move along, but I'm going to call on myself and pick up where you just led that comment. I think what those who support this bill is telling you is they feel like they don't get that time, that if you all look at it only as a business meeting, that they don't get to interact because there's not a committee meeting process to what school districts do. I did dig through my papers. I didn't find exactly the one I wanted, but I did find the one that you cited, which is 721138. And that is state law that says you must have regular meetings, a very detailed description of the steps that must be followed. It says there's a majority quorum. That it sets up a mechanism for someone to abstain under a conflict of interest. And then when you go to the bottom of that and you get to 2, it says the power granted in this subsection shall not be construed to relieve a board of compliance with state laws. Where because I think we've had a theme this year running about the balance of who does what and where one person's lane begins and another ends. Do you want to give me some feedback on where you think the right balance is?
I think that the current structure of our open meetings laws is the right balance, and it's been tried and tested for over decades in Kansas. There's lots of case law defining how you apply them, what the obligations of public bodies are, and that's in Kansas Open Meetings Act is KSA 75-4317. You'll note in my testimony that I grabbed some language from the Attorney General's guidance for public bodies on public meetings, and when it talks about public participation in meetings, even the Attorney General agrees that this is a matter of local policy under the State Open Meetings Act, and we believe that that strikes the right balance, maintains the right flexibility. I would encourage board members who have felt frustrations to continue to work through their local processes, because it sounds like for the previous conferee, they found a balance that worked for their Board of Education and came to agreement on. That is how you reach a point where you are working together as a body in service of your students and your families.
So the statute that I was asking Jason to find, because I kind of remember seeing something, and of course, I'm human and I could very much be wrong. And it says that the board president and the superintendent set it, but there is a vote of 3 members to bring that out. Is that your understanding of statute?
I can find this. I know what you're referring to. I know I've read something like that. I think what it is it gives the direction that the board chair is the person who prepares the agenda, just as the committee chair is the person who prepares the agenda in a legislative meeting, or the mayor is the person who prepares the agenda for a city council meeting. But ultimately, whether that is the agenda that a board chooses to follow in its public meeting is a decision of the entire board that is made with a majority vote.
Okay, so that's my next question. If it takes 4 people at the meeting to amend the meeting agenda, do you see where it would be difficult for someone to not break coma through a serial meeting to speak to the other people on their body to say, hey, this is something I'd like to do, this is why I would like to do it, prior to the meeting?
I don't think those considerations are any different for a school board than they are for a 5-member county commission or a 5-member city commission. Again, it's the same principles, and that goes back to that idea that there's no substantial evidence that the current system that we have in place is not working in the vast majority of cases where local control is being allowed over these kinds of decisions for local governing bodies.
Okay, thank you. And I'm eyeballing the clock. Any other last questions for this conferee? I'd like to get at least one more in and ask the committee to help us to continue to try to catch up. So the chair calls on Jim Carlskent.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. It's after 3 o'clock, and so I know you're looking at your watches, and so I won't take a great deal of time. Having been a superintendent, prepared, and having attended hundreds of meetings and putting together agendas, we do follow the statutes, but there's one thing that I think that I would like to refer back to what Mr. Trabert said in his opening comments about people entering buildings. I think we're on a slippery slope to a degree, in the sense that we're going to let anybody come in at any time the building is open. For example, and we have a few former teachers in this committee. If you had a school board member, and a lot of school board members, unfortunately, run for the school board to go after somebody's job or has a certain agenda. If, for example, you were a teacher and you knew a school board member was after you, and they said, I'm coming to your school building, and you can't stop me. They can go into your classroom. The intimidation that takes place, and not only that, with the intimidation that could take place, is the violation of oftentimes negotiated agreements. Now, one of your ranking member, I think, has some experience with negotiated agreements and could comment on it. But negotiated agreements could bring lawsuits upon the school district and other situations. So, I know you guys are in a hurry. You've got a lot of things to do. But this is a very serious topic about, there's so much in this bill. We could spend hours on this thing. The questions of open meetings, the comments. This is a bill that's looking for a problem. Things are in place now, and I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Jim. Representative Hubert.
As a former school board member, there's another side to the story, and I can tell you it is not a bill looking for a problem. As a former school board member, I had an acting superintendent try to explain to me why I could not look at the applications for the person that was going to be our new superintendent, because we were following KSAB policy in regards to 2 members being on a committee that would bring 3 names to us. I explained to them that I did not report to the School Board Association, and their rules were not applicable to me in regards to seeing those applications. I was able to look at those applications. I was told that I was breaking some rule by doing that, and I told them, again, as a board member, I was in an area where I was able to access, and I accessed those applications and was, again, there's two sides to the story. I appreciate what you're saying. There's valid things that could be discussed, but there definitely is a reason. Sometimes when a board member, in working with a superintendent, even in this case an acting superintendent, needs to have some ability to do their job and they're stopped by somebody that doesn't have the authority to stop them.
Thank you, Representative Hubert. Other questions for the conferee? Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you just remind us who is the superintendent's boss, and if that is a collective group, what it would do to the process if a minority portion of that group ran roughshod over everyone else?
Well, Representative, to answer your question, the board employs the superintendent. And technically, the board only, employs the superintendent. It's the remainder of the school district that's up to the superintendent and the other administrators with respect to hiring and firing.
Representative Stockstill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're correct. When I was NEA president and teacher in Shawnee Mission, I helped negotiate 8 teacher contracts. And that was back at a point when violence in the classroom and incursions into the classroom and so on weren't nearly as big an issue as they are today. And I know that there are contracts that are negotiated to make sure that people who come into the building come in under the correct situations and scrutiny. And in my opinion, nobody should be able to come in from the outside without checking in and going into a classroom. That's outrageous. And so I'd have a lot of problem with the way this is written. And yeah.
There is a great deal of vagueness in this bill.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the conferee? All right. We have time for our last person. Leah, would you like to come up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Shannon gave our testimony. I think it was just a double notation, but thank you.
Thank you. Then that actually concludes our testimony. I'd like to thank everybody for a very robust discussion and helping us to stay on schedule. And I'd like to thank everybody who came to testify today. Anything from anybody for the good of the order? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.